Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast, episode 903, as we continue to look at Snowfall Season 1, episode 8, Baby Teeth. Just a quick recap of this episode. Franklin's business increases. It causes a rift within the crew. Eddie continues to protect and look out for Alejandro, and Lenny, remember him? Lenny strikes back. So, themes of this episode: Family Feud. We see two organizations going through challenges that come with running drugs and crack, cocaine, and what have you, but in different places. They're in different places, as you know, Franklin and his crew in the beginning, and of course the Villanuevas, who are supposed to be veterans, but are going through some of their issues of their own. We will flush those out during the deep dive.
Price point's right. We sell it right here in same as we.
So yes, let's get to the deep dive organizations. So now I've watched season 1. I don't know how many times I've rewatched Snowfall. At least 3 or 4 times, and watched season 1. I'd really never thought about the contrast of the two organizations during the time that I watched it until this particular episode. You see Leon, you see Franklin, Leon, and Kevin. Business is booming. They hit the jackpot with the crack that they got with the crack that they got from Swim in Oakland. And again, they are seeing the benefits of the crack business from that standpoint. Also seeing some of the trials and tribulations that it can cause, and we'll talk about those as well. So their growing pains are natural. These are 3 teenagers who, frankly, really don't know what they're doing, learning as they go, with Franklin being the de facto leader. We contrast that to the Villanuevas. Now, the Villanuevas have been in the game a long time. Like, forget about Pedro, forget about Lucia. Let's just look at their parents. Like, their parents are older, especially Lucia's father, who is dying, and look at Pedro's dad. They've been in the game for a minute. Like, we're talking, I would guess at least talking like 20 to 30, 20 to 25 years, at least minimum 20 years. And they're going through a transition that is really self-inflicted and really coming from within, in regards to what's transpiring with Lucille, Pedro, and Oso. So we see these two organizations trying to deal with the challenges that comes with running a drug organization, and also trying to deal with the challenges that come from having to deal with each other, whether it be through a sibling or whether it be through friends who really don't know what they're doing, who are learning on the go. Now, you'd probably rather be, if you had to pick an organization, who you would rather be, without even thinking about what's going to happen in the future of this show, you probably would have to lean towards Franklin and that organization, considering that their mistakes are, again, they're making mistakes that, you see made all the time by young drug dealers or young organizations that are trying to develop, versus an established organization that really shouldn't be making the mistakes that the Villanuevas are making. We'll talk more about that during the best scenes. But I really thought that for the first time, that I saw, that I rewatched this episode and this season, that I never thought to compare those two organizations as they were, as you know, as they're developing, or as they do, especially in season one in particular. So it really stood out in this particular episode as we see Franklin and Leon and Kevin experience their real first taste of prosperity and success. Best scenes: Leon, Kevin, and a junkie. So um, they come back from Oakland. They cut up the crack, um, and Franklin decides to give out free samples to get to see how to basically as a tester. We've seen this in the wire with the testers and what have you, free samples to get a sense of how strong and how potent or the response that the junkies are going to have to the crack. So Leon and Kevin, of course, are the soldiers. They are assigned to give out the crack. And you see a situation where a junkie is so addicted that he tries to steal. One, like, there's a couple of scenes. One scene, he tries to steal all the crack from Kevin. One Lego Kevin shoes. And Leon had to get him off him. And despite again, the scene was fun. It was funny, but it was also just showed you just how addictive, this stuff was. Like, he was grabbing. He's getting beat up and grabbing at Kevin's shoes at the same time as Leon is beating the shit out of him. Then you had a situation later on, which caused a rift within the crew, where a junkie tried to stab Leon. That was shown off screen. They didn't show that particular scene. You saw blood on Leon's shoes. So in this episode, we see how addictive that it became, that the crack epidemic hit with LA, and we saw why Franklin was so excited coming off the last episode, in terms of the vision that he had, in terms of the money that was going to be made. He has a top product. It was just a matter of distribution and how an organization, in terms of how he's going to get this stuff put out to the community. Jerome, Franklin, Louis. So Franklin tells Jerome about his idea. He wants to keep it within the community. Gives them the numbers in terms of saying they would be making seven figures. Says they go, instead of the $10 nickel bags, they'll be selling them for like $50. They'll be selling for not $50, but they'll be making basically 10 times as much as they would with the dime bags. Well, because Jerome is reluctant, but does give in somewhat to Franklin and says, you know what, I'll pass out the samples. They shake hands, and as soon as Franklin leaves, Louis just goes right in. She basically says he's going to do it regardless. Franklin is going to do this with or without us. She convinces Jerome, telling him this story of her just wanting more. And again, this is the genesis. This is the beginning of, Louis being Louis, like the Louis that we saw at the end of season 6. It started out with this particular season, and Louis, Jerome says, "Hey, don't we have a nice life here? Don't we have a nice life? We live in a house. He owns his own house, which is big. Which is big for a black man in L.A. even in the '80s. But he says that final word says, "Hey, it's not enough." And Louis basically, with that story that she tells about, how she had dreams, dreams in terms of dance and things of that nature, basically says, no, it's not enough. In essence, doesn't directly say that, but her body language, and basically she talks to Jerome into believing in Franklin's idea and going through it. Again, this was a scene that pretty much we will be a recurring theme over the course. It's going to be a recurring theme as we go through these episodes and through these seasons, where you see Louis as a driving force behind Franklin's ideals and Jerome giving in. Lucia and Ramiro. So coming off the heels of last episode, where Ramiro where Pedro clearly told Ramiro about Gustavo's part in the business. You see Ramiro discussing a garden with Lucille. He tells the story about how, this used to be her playground and he replaced that with a garden. And she immediately, after he talks about picking up about the future of the business and the direction that it's going to go in, she immediately picks up on the fact that Pedro told Ramiro about Gustavo's part in the business, and she says they have a conversation. He tells her, as long as you don't tell Gustavo about this conversation, we're good. And they have another conversation that is seen off screen. So at this point, there's like zero trust. There wasn't great trust between Lucille and Pedro to begin with, but I do think Lucille had somewhat of a soft spot for Pedro from a standpoint of like she treated him like, I guess the comparisons I would use is Michael and Fredo. Like, hey, we know he's incompetent, but he is still my brother. I'm gonna take care of him. I want to make sure, Dad, Papa will want me to take care of him. So she did have that kind of attitude towards Pedro, despite Pedro's incompetence and despite Pedro being weak. But when she finds out that Pedro went to his dad, she has zero respect. At that point, she has no respect for him. And that relationship will never be the same. Like that relationship is done. He doesn't trust her. She doesn't trust him. And we'll see how that goes moving forward. But I can't say it was a bad move by Pedro. Because his father is the head of the organization and he is his father. And if he wouldn't have told his father about Gustavo, eventually, somehow, his father was going to find out about Gustavo's part of the business, or maybe he should, or maybe he wouldn't have found out. I'm not going, I wasn't a fan of the character Pedro per se, but I can't knock him too much for making this move. It was, it's kind of a safe move. But we're going to see, there are going to be some ramifications for this move, as we'll see moving along throughout the course of the series. We'll certainly see how this plays out. But this was a big time. This was a big divide between those two. They have never been as divided as we've seen throughout the course of this season, in terms of Pedro and Lucille, and we'll see how that plays out. Leon and Franklin. So Franklin, following the fight that Franklin has with Leon, and they had a fight earlier in the episode where Leon was complaining about almost getting stabbed by the junkie. It has blood on his shoes. He wants hazard pay. Then Franklin starts comparing, what he went through compared to what Leon goes through, and says basically, I've been almost killed twice and what have you. So they get into a little kerfuffle and outright fight, tussling, what have you. And Kevin breaks it up. So following that, Leon goes to Franklin's house to apologize. He doesn't know that Lenny, of course, who we know was raped a few episodes back by Carvel, was waiting for him. He shoots Leon off screen. Franklin sees, as Franklin comes home, Franklin does not see Leon's radio, which was on the porch, but sees Leon in his backyard as he sees clothes on the clothes hanger on the ground. Goes to Leon, immediately takes off his shirt to apply pressure on the wound. He got shot in the torso, and then goes to call the police. But this is why Leon is the number two, clear number two in the organization. He does have despite being shot, does have the presence of mind to tell Franklin, go hide the crack. Franklin immediately, in a panic, packs up all the crack and hides it in Melanie's closet. And that's of course how the episode wraps up. MVP Crack. The MVP of this episode was Crack. It without question. You see the effect that it had on the community in this episode in particular. It had in regards to the junkies, in regards to everybody, and how it's going to affect what these characters do and how these characters move forward. Will be life changing. We see, with Louis sees her opportunity. Franklin sees his opportunity in terms of what moves can be made with it. So Crack was the MVP of this episode. As far as the Teddy part of this, Teddy Mac Alejandro storyline, it actually was entertaining. This episode, I actually didn't mind it as much as past episodes. We know how complicated that storyline is. Teddy takes Victoria, who's obviously looking for the girl that Alejandro killed, Christian. He takes her and throws her off track by going to this club. They get drunk. Teddy, and this is how devious Teddy is. Teddy purposely throws up on somebody, gets beat up, has to go back to his apartment, and then he had already made the phone call to one of the CIA operatives to go to the house that Alejandro and Logan were in, where the girl was killed in the first episode, and throw Victoria off track as one of the operatives, one of his CIA partners that he works with, that he knows clearly, says, hey, if you don't leave, I will call the cops. As they were trying to break into that house. So at this point, Teddy thinks that all is good, all is well in terms of throwing Victoria off the set, off tracking down Christian, and you have a situation where Alejandro had to go back as his camp, which his wife is at, got hit. Doesn't even know if his wife is still alive. So he had to go immediately back. He had to go back over down to South America, and to have Teddy taking care of business stateside. So this particular episode, I did not have a problem with that storyline per se. Teddy dancing in the club, and it fit in. It didn't. So I don't think it threw off the episode. But the main focus of this episode were the contrasting styles of a up-and-coming drug organization with Franklin Saint, Jerome, Louis, versus an established family organization that could be headed for some troubles within. So that was the main sticking point of this particular episode. That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast, episode 902. Episode 902. We will be back next time with, episode 903. We'll be back next time with episode 9, season 1 of the hit series, epic series, Snowfall. So long.